Hey everyone, tonight we'll start with a topic that's a little less philosophical and a lot more greasy medieval junk food. That's right, even in a world without fast food chains, vending machines, or hot dog carts, people still found a way to snack. And let me tell you, some of it was surprisingly delicious, and some of it was like a warning from your ancestral gut. But all of it was steeped in the flavor of the times. So, before you get too comfortable, take a second to like this video if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it? I'm always curious to see who's wandering with me in their sleep from all over the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a small fan for some background hum. And take a stroll with me through the medieval world, where most of the snacks looked suspicious and tasted even more so. 1. Fried apple pies, a drop of sweetness from a time without glaze. If you're picturing a brown sugar-dusted, butter-scented donut neatly placed on a clean porcelain plate, like in some vintage cafe, then, sorry, you've wandered into a different universe. Here, where the sun still sets slowly behind slate-roofed houses, and the gutters are never quite dry, a fried apple pie is just enough of an adventure to make you rethink what sweet really means. It starts with an apple, but not the shiny, bright red kind you see in the supermarket. No, it's a windfall apple from behind the tavern. Small, lumpy, a bit sour, and it may or may not have been pecked a few times by a goose. Those apple pieces are chopped with a dull knife, mixed into a batter that the storyteller doesn't want to know the ingredients of. But there are definitely eggs, and maybe some ale, because water in the city back then was a gamble. Ale, at least, killed a few germs and made life a little more cheerful. That mixture is dropped into a pan of grease, usually lard. Reused grease, so reused it could probably vote. The sizzle that erupts isn't just a signal for a meal. It's a reminder that you're living in a world where yesterday's lunch is contributing to tonight's dinner in the form of flavor. The fried apple pie is ready. Crispy edges, soft inside, golden in a way you can't tell is from honey or kitchen smoke. If you're lucky or rich, there might be imported sugar sprinkled on top. A luxury so great, it could make the neighbors start rumors that you're having an affair with the royal chef. No sugar? A little honey, stolen from the beehive near the parish house will do. And if you have nothing but faith and a hot pan, that's fine too. That fried apple pie can still make you, if only for a fleeting moment, forget the sour cabbage soup you've had to eat for 5 days straight. And when you bite into it, that pie is just soft enough to remind you that even amidst plagues, politics, and street-side garbage, people still find a way to fry up a little bit of hope. 2. Squeaky cheese. The old friend who always shows up. A fried apple pie can make you smile, but then it's gone, like all other sweet things in an era without refrigerators and unwavering trust. But you know what always shows up? Quietly, unassumingly, never letting anyone down? Cheese curds. Not the smooth, stringy cheese from a pizza commercial, and certainly not the kind pressed into a mold as beautiful as a saint statue. Medieval cheese is a bit chewy, sometimes mushy, and sometimes it squeaks in your mouth like a mouse protesting being eaten. They're called cheese curds, tiny little lumps, separated early in the cheese-making process before they're hard enough to kill a fly or serve as a house foundation. To be honest, cheese isn't trying to impress you. It's not smooth, not fancy, and has no intention of being the star of the feast. It just is. Quiet. Steadfast. Like an old friend who shows up with a bag of food and says, "I know you've had a long day." For pilgrims passing through the village, monks awaiting their evening meal, or children coming home late from catechism, cheese curds are a reward that needs no reason. They're wrapped in cloth, stored in clay pots, or even just stuffed into a pocket as if time and temperature have no say in the matter. If you're lucky, they're lightly fried over a wood fire, crispy on the outside, still squeaky on the inside. If you're not lucky, still edible, as long as you don't ask the age of the cow. And even if they're a bit smelly, a bit strange, a bit uncertain, there's something about them that inspires trust. Like an old food that never changes, to remind you that no matter how messy life gets, there's always something you can chew on and survive. 3. Turnip pie. The poor man's dessert mishap. Some dreams begin with honey, but some winter nights begin with a turnip. The turnip. Not the most glamorous vegetable in the garden. It's not fragrant like a leek, doesn't sparkle like a raisin, nor does it carry the mystique of Eastern spices. It's just a pale white root, living underground, growing wherever it can, even next to the chicken coop. But in an age where sugar is a treasure, and apples don't always grow in season, there will always be someone who looks at a turnip and thinks, if I mash it, mix in some egg, add a little honey, could it become a pie? And so, the turnip pie was born. Not because it was delicious, but because there was nothing else to make. The turnip is grated, steamed until soft, then mixed with egg, honey, if your family keeps bees, a few raisins, if someone got their pocket picked that day, and a pinch of flour, a flour that may or may not have once been actual wheat. It's all poured into a thick pie crust, lightly baked over a coal fire. And just like that, a dessert is born. It looks like a pie. But when you bite into it, it tastes like dirt trying to be a good person. Some days, it's sweet. Some days, it's sour. Some days, it's as bland as water used to boil sandals. But people still ate it. Not out of love, but out of hope. Hope that it would be better next time. Hope that the next day, there would be real apples. Or at least, hope that the turnip pie would make their meager meal look a little less sad. In monasteries, they made this on fasting days. At the market fair, an old woman would hawk it with a raspy voice. Sugar-free sweet pie. For those who need sweet dreams without being too dreamy. And strangely, when the pie is still warm, when the smell of turnip mixes with honey, with the scent of smoke and the distant sound of church bells, it brings a feeling that is almost happiness, not the easily recognizable kind, but the smoldering kind, like embers under ash, like a lullaby sung as the afternoon sun fades at the market. For the handheld meat pie, something is hidden in the crust, and you shouldn't ask, have you ever eaten something that was delicious, convenient, and hot, but at the same time made you a little scared? Welcome to the world of the pasty, the medieval handheld meat pie. A pie with a thick crust folded over like a seashell, crispy on the outside, warm on the inside, and a complete biological mystery. To be fair, it's like an ancient hot pocket, but without a microwave, an expiration date, or an ingredient list for you to sue anyone over. Inside that crust is meat, And meat is a broad concept. Very broad. So broad it's suspicious. If you live near a castle, you might get pork, lamb, or even venison. The kind of meat that, when you bite into it, feels like you're eating nature's bounty. But if you live far away, far from the center, from power, from luck, then the filling will be rabbit, pigeon, catfish, eel, field mouse, or whatever used to move on legs, scales, or was unidentifiable. But don't worry, you won't notice, because it's all minced, mixed with root vegetables, herbs, black pepper, garlic or onion if available, then stewed until everything becomes a soft, salty, fragrant, and very secretive filling. The crust is made thick, not for taste, but so it can be held with dirty hands, and the held part later thrown away as an offering to ghosts or rats, depending on the region. In the mines, workers would even carve their initials into the edge of the pie, so no one would eat the wrong one. A form of food security you could call the medieval blockchain. No one asks what's in the pie. Asking is rude. Asking is doubting hospitality. Asking is stupid. People just bite and pray. But strangely, the pie brings an indescribable feeling of fullness. It fits in your hand, warms your cold palm, carrying the scent of herbs and cheap spices that are still enough to evoke a vague memory of a mother, of a hearth, of days when no one asked questions, just ate and lived on. 5. Sugar-coated fennel seeds, the breath mint and psychological hurdle. Some foods are born to nourish the body. Some foods are born to soothe the soul. And then, there are things so tiny, so hard, that after eating them, you don't know if you've just been blessed or paid for your sins. Welcome to the world of sugar-coated fennel seeds. The Middle Ages had no chewing gum, no mouthwash, no cool mint eucalyptus lozenges. So after a meal of time-stuffed pigeon, 3-day-old fish stew, and a meat pie that might contain eel, what you need is a miracle for your breath. A fennel seed, a seed as small as a pinky nail, but with a scent as strong as a curse from a longtime neighbor, is coated in a layer of sugar as hard as a rock. Not modern sugar, but sugar melted, stirred by hand, poured over each seed, air-dried, dropped, sifted, and, hopefully, no cat hair got in. After a meal, nobles would be offered a dish of these seeds, white as pearls, small as etiquette. Bite down, crack. First taste, sweet. Next taste, fennel. The taste after that? Wait, am I eating medicine or candy? Fennel has a licorice-like smell, a medicinal sweetness like a cough drop with intentions of suppressing your taste buds. People ate it because it aided digestion. It freshened the breath. It made others think you had money. But the truth is, bite too hard and you'll break a tooth. Suck on it too long and your mouth turns bitter. And eat too many and you'll be kicked out of high society for eating like a starving commoner. Commoners had a cheaper version. Mix honey with the seeds and pray. Was it good? Unclear. Was it safe? Not sure. But at least they had fresh breath, by the very flexible definition of the 13th century. And yet, strangely, there's something very clean, very calm, very sanitary about these little seeds. As if, no matter what strange thing you just ate, something so bizarre your soul recoiled, this tiny candy would save you. Not from the smell, but from your own self-doubt. 6. Honey cakes, a sweet whisper for the patient. Not every sweet treat is a kiss. Some are a tight hug, chewy, warm, and full of commitment. That's exactly what a honey cake is. This isn't the kind of cake you bite into, and it melts in your mouth. No. This is the kind of cake you bite into, chew 5 times, rethink your life, and then continue chewing 7 more times to understand why this small piece can contain so many layers of emotion. The ingredients? As simple as first love, flour, water, honey, and sometimes, if you're special or have relatives working in the royal warehouse, a few spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, or a clove that fell from a nobleman's feast table. The result? A thick block of cake, chewy, sticky, not soft, not smooth, not melt in your mouth, but it endures, like a statement. I'm here. You get tired, you rest. I'll still be here. Medieval honey cake wasn't for fancy eating. It was a cake to take on a journey, climbing mountains, going to the market, going to war, or simply sitting and watching the rain through a wooden window. It doesn't spoil quickly. It doesn't crumble. It doesn't betray you. It's just a little stubborn. People gave each other honey cakes at weddings as a symbol of sweetness and bonding, and also because you could use it as a brick if the marriage failed. A mother would pack this cake for her son going off to be a soldier. A wife would hide a slice under her pillow, not because they were hungry, but because it carried the taste of home. And if you eat a piece of honey cake on a cold winter's night by an old coal stove in a thick, coarse woolen sweater with the sound of rain dripping from a rotten wooden roof, you'll understand why this cake was once the national dessert of a Europe in turmoil. It's not dazzling, but it's warm. It's not delicate, but it's real. And sometimes, that's enough. 7. Crispy fish skin, a symphony of hot grease and uncompromising frugality. If honey cake is the food of patience and endurance, then the next dish is the declaration of a survivor. Crispy, salty, and, honestly, a bit fishy. Crispy fish skin. This wasn't a dish anyone planned from the start. No one woke up on a winter morning, stretched, and said, "Today I shall fry fish skin." No, this dish was born when someone looked at the pile of discarded fish skin after dinner, then looked at the still hot pan of oil and thought, "Wait, isn't this a waste?" And so, the fish skin, the stuff usually thrown to cats, chickens, or the wind, was dropped into bubbling hot oil. The sizzle that arose was like an unexpected symphony, waking up the entire poor neighborhood. The hot grease made the skin curl, puff up, and turn crispy. The smell that arose was, well, let's put it this way. If you fry it indoors, for the next week, your house will smell like Poseidon went camping and forgot his soap. But the fishy smell is a small matter, because when that skin is crispy in your hand, sprinkled with a little salt, maybe some garlic, or dried pepper, you'll forgive everything. The taste is as crisp as a late autumn leaf, salty as a dragon's tear, as generous as the heart of the fishmonger, unadorned, but always throwing in an extra little piece for fun at no charge. In fishing villages, fried fish skin is the national snack. Children fight over it, drunkards beg for more, and even the yawning guards crave it. In the big cities, people started sprinkling it with fennel, glazing it with honey, even calling it native tempura, as if forgetting it was once the reborn from the trash dish. And the strange thing is, despite the strong smell, the weird shape, and the few scales still clinging on as a reminder, fried fish skin still became a snack that made people smile on a bad day. Crispy, salty, full of fat, like a quick and straightforward comfort. Not sweet, but sincere. And when you eat fried fish skin, you might think, this must be the bottom of the social ladder. But no. The ultimate in resourcefulness is when old bread meets flat ale. A bittersweet union that makes you want to eat it and apologize to your stomach at the same time. 8. Beer-soaked bread. The depressed version of French toast. If you've ever had a moment in your life where you were so poor that you looked at a 3-day-old piece of dried-out bread and saw an opportunity, then you'll understand why this dish exists. Beer-soaked bread sounds as fancy as a fusion dish from a bar somewhere between Berlin and Paris. But the truth is, this is the dish of a desperate person with a creative mind and a stomach rumbling like thunder. Ingredients: old bread, stale, flat, slightly sour ale, sometimes a bit of sugar or spice if someone just married rich. And that's it. How to make it: cut the bread, soak it in beer until it's as soft as your fate. Eat. Pray you don't get a stomach ache. This dish was once the breakfast, afternoon snack, or forget your sorrows meal for the working class of the Middle Ages. It was both cheap and made use of two things that were often thrown away: old bread and flat ale. It sounds pathetic, but when you eat it on a freezing morning, holding a warm wooden bowl, the faint smell of yeast rising to your nose, the soft, tangy, sweet taste of the bread melting, you'll feel something strange. The quiet kindness of an imperfect dish. No one would post this on Instagram if they had phones back then. No one would show this off at a royal banquet. But there's a special kind of affection attached to ugly but honest food. And sometimes, that's all you need. A bowl of soft bread in flat ale, to know that no matter how poor you are, you can still create something warm, filling, and enough to keep living for one more day. But the night isn't over, because the next item isn't a food, but a drink, specially brewed not for refreshment, but for survival. A dark black liquid, bitter as the truth, but fragrant as a smoldering hope. It's not coffee, not cocoa. It's 9. Boiled barley water, the black water that smells of sweat and faith. In an age with no iced coffee, no bubble tea, people still needed something to wake themselves from lethargy, hunger, and poverty. And so, boiled barley water was born. Not beer, not tea, and not the detox water you see influencers posting. It is simply burnt roasted barley, the blacker, the better. Water, boiled, and drunk. The taste, bitter as an epiphany, smells like a properly cleaned stable, and as warm as a timid hope on a 3-degree day. Farmers often drank it in the early morning before heading to the fields. Blacksmiths drank it after every hour by the coal forge. Women would save half a cup for their children, as if passing on something warmer than milk, the strength to endure. No caffeine, no sugar, just a burnt smell, a slightly charred taste, and the feeling of, I am still alive. But in that simplicity lies a very rare kind of sincerity. Because when you drink roasted barley water, you're not pretending anything. You don't drink it because it's delicious. You drink it to keep going. The old folks would say, that black water once saved the whole village from despair, not because it was nutritious, but because it was all that was left. And when the cup is empty, the pot of ash still warm by the hearth, you know, the night is not yet over, because the next item isn't for drinking, not for eating quickly, but for gnawing. A tooth-breaking but bonding food. As stubborn as a grandmother, smelling of sunshine, and can be used as a weapon if needed. Prepare yourself, because we're about to meet 10. Hardtack, the food that followed armies and the vow to never mold. If there's any snack that represents the concept of surviving despite time, weather, and all culinary logic, it would be the hard biscuit, also known as hardtack. Ingredients? Just flour and water. No yeast, no sugar, no hope. The result? A piece of biscuit as thick as a brick, as heavy as karma, and as pale as the human spirit during a bad harvest. Why did people eat it? Well, because they had no other choice. This biscuit was invented by soldiers, sailors, the poor, and anyone who ever looked at the last bag of flour in the pantry and thought, what can I make that's edible and won't kill me? Hardtack doesn't spoil. Seriously. There are ancient biscuits that are still intact after 100 years. No mold, no rot, no decay, just a little discolored, like an ancestor's wedding photo. When taken into battle, soldiers would often break the biscuit with the butt of their rifle, soak it in hot water, stew it with salted meat, or gnaw on it directly if they still had teeth. They ate to survive, not to enjoy. The people of the Middle Ages were the same. When winter came, the turnips were gone, the cheese was moldy, and the crispy fish skin had long been eaten. Hardtack was the only friend that remained. It doesn't betray. It doesn't fall apart. It's not sweet, not salty, but it's always there. Each piece is a reminder. You are still alive. You can still gnaw. You still have hope. And as the night passes, as the snacks of the old times appear one by one, spicy, salty, crispy, chewy, depressing, we realize history is not only written with swords, blood, and thrones, but also with tiny snacks, with the crunch of biting into a honey cake, the sizzle of fish skin sinking into hot oil, the sound of teeth hitting hardtack like a silent vow between hunger and survival. All in on snacks, but never out of love. If you're lying in the dark, wrapped in a blanket, and have listened this far, you might have already fallen asleep during one of the pie descriptions, or you're listening as if history itself were edible. Either way, thank you for joining me for a feast without chandeliers, without tablecloths, but full of flavor. And don't worry, history has many more dishes yet to be told. Just send a message. Tell me more. And I'll set the table again. Sleep well and dream of a medieval market where honey cakes float overhead, cheese whispers tales of old love, and the fish skin stays crispy even if you sleep with your mouth open. Dear friend, after you've patted your full belly, satisfied from a medieval meal of crispy fried sour apples, a turnip cake pretending to be dessert, and a blood pudding rolling next to a dry loaf of bread, the most logical thing to do is sleep. And when you sleep, you dream. But perhaps you've never asked yourself, if I had lived a few thousand years ago, could my dream have changed the fate of a nation? The answer, surprisingly, is yes. In ancient times, a world where Google didn't exist and psychologists hadn't opened their clinics, people didn't think dreams were the product of stress or late-night fried food. They believed they were messages from the gods. An email from Enlil, the supreme god of the Sumerians, a fiery text from Sobek, the crocodile god of the Nile, a gentle warning, like, don't plant rice tomorrow, from ancestral spirits. just as you scan a QR code to open a restaurant menu. Ancient people read dreams to open life's instruction manual. They recorded every dream, dividing them into good and bad. And what's more, they had professional dream interpreters. Not fortune tellers in red scarves, but baru, true scholars, formally trained to analyze dreams using thick clay tablets. In the ancient world, dreams were not to be forgotten. They were remembered, analyzed, revered, and feared. Sleeping, basically, was a nightly religious ritual. And my friend, if you are lying here listening to these words, your eyes gently closing, the taste of honey from that pretend honey cake still on your lips, then be ready, because tonight we will journey through ancient civilizations, not on foot, but through the subconscious. We will encounter dreams that once saved nations, healed bodies, or warned of a death as silent as a breath in a stone temple. Dreams are no trivial matter. They are the secret language the universe whispers to those who dare to listen. Imagine you are lying under a clay roof, the braying of a donkey outside as the night wind blows sand into its eyes. In the darkness of the land between the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, a man turns over and sighs. He cannot sleep because tonight he dreamed of a date palm growing from his chest. And he knows tomorrow morning he must call the Baru. The Baru were not ordinary fortune tellers. They were experts in reading dreams, formally trained in the great temples of Mesopotamia. They read clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform, the world's oldest dream manuals. In Mesopotamia, a dream was a state document. King Gilgamesh once dreamed of a meteor falling into his city, and the Baru interpreted it as a sign of a special friend who was about to appear. Sure enough, Enkidu arrived, and one of the greatest epics was born from a dream. Dreams even determine national policy. If a king dreamed of a goat with wings, then war must be stopped immediately. No arguments. One of the oldest texts, named Ishkar Zakak, the Dream Book of Zakik, lists hundreds of types of dreams in detail. The people of Mesopotamia classified dreams as true or false, and also as divine or demonic. To dream of being given a sword by the god Marduk was good fortune, but to dream of being chased by the dead required lighting a fire, scattering salt, and praying for 3 nights. That is why a night's sleep was never just sleep. Each dream was a map, guiding people through seasons, wars, dynasties, and death. To sleep without remembering a dream was sometimes more frightening than having a nightmare. Because at least with a bad dream, you knew what to do. But with no dream, perhaps the gods had turned their backs on you. From the clay roofs, let your mind drift gently down the Nile River, where dreams were written on papyrus, carved in stone, and sometimes enacted as administrative policy. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where if you dreamed of eating a crocodile, congratulations, you were about to get a promotion. Don't laugh. That is a completely serious dream interpretation from the Ramesside Dream Book, an ancient text found in the artisan village of Deir el-Medina. The book begins with the line, "If a man sees himself doing X, the result is Y." Every dream, no matter how strange, had a meaning and was clearly ranked, good or bad. Black ink, a good omen. Red ink, a bad omen. No gray areas. Egypt was very decisive. Where Mesopotamia had the Baru, Egypt had a whole system of priests specializing in dream interpretation, especially in the temples of Thoth, the god of knowledge and writing. You didn't analyze your own dream. You went to the temple, recounted the dream, and they would grade it. You could even book a sacred dream on demand. You would go to the temple, purify yourself, and pray before sleeping right there, hoping a god would appear in your dream and offer advice. And dreams didn't just serve the living. When a person died, the Egyptians believed their soul would continue to dream. So, they were buried with dream books, amulets, and even sample dreams for reference to help the soul navigate the afterlife. In a world where pyramids were eternal rest stops and cats were mummified out of respect, dreams were the map of life and death. So, if tonight you dream you are riding a crocodile, don't be startled. Who knows? You might get a raise tomorrow. From Egypt, we cross the Mediterranean Sea again, to the islands of the Greeks. In our time, if you have a headache, you Google it. If you have insomnia, you buy melatonin. And if you dream of a snake crawling over you, you scream and check under the bed with a flashlight. But in ancient Greece, if you dreamed of a snake crawling over you, you would clutch your chest and smile happily because you had just been healed by a god. No joke. They called it incubatio, sleeping to be healed. Imagine, you are a potter, your hands swollen from a lifetime of firing kilns. Herbal remedies haven't worked. So you pack your bags and go to a sacred temple, dedicated to Asclepios, the god of medicine, who holds a staff with a snake wrapped around it. You wouldn't see a doctor. There were no clinics, only a stone bed, incense, and a deep sleep in a divine dream. Before sleeping, you had to purify yourself, bathe in a sacred spring, fast, burn incense, and let go of your worries. And then you would lie down and wait for a dream. The Greeks believed Asclepios would appear in the dream, perhaps as a man in a white robe, or as a snake slithering over your body. When you awoke, the wound would be gone, or you would know exactly what to do next to get well. This wasn't superstition. It was a medical ritual practiced nationwide. Temples of Asclepios were everywhere, and each one had case files meticulously carved in stone. Many physicians of the time, like Hippocrates, the father of medicine, did not dismiss dreams, but used them to diagnose illness. Sleep. A general checkup. At the temples of Asclepios, patients slept as if it were the most important meeting of their lives, an appointment with a god, with hope, with their own soul. And if tonight you are lying here, vaguely thinking of a snake winding its way around you, don't worry. Remember that thousands of ancient Greeks deliberately dreamed of it, just to wake up the next morning alive, and no longer in pain. But not every dream is as sweet as Egyptian honey. Not every night is an appointment with a healing god. Because sometimes you don't dream of gods. You dream of your house burning, the dead rising from the earth, or a disembodied hand stroking your face in the dark. And at that moment, in the ancient world, you didn't just have a bad night. You just received a curse. A nightmare in Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Greek culture was not the product of stress or sleeping in the wrong position. It was a signal from a lost soul, an angry god, or an evil demon lurking near you. And if you didn't handle it correctly, the dream could stick to you. So, the ancients didn't just interpret dreams, they also cleansed them. They might burn cedar, bathe in salt water, sleep with their head at the other end of the bed, or wear an amulet of the evil eye. And if the dream was too terrifying, the Greeks had a method. Tell the dream to the earth. They would bend down, whisper into the ground, then pluck a tuft of grass, as if transferring the dream to another world. The Egyptians even had anti-nightmare amulets, often placed under children's pillows. Some dreams were considered absolutely dangerous. Dreaming of being buried alive, of hair falling out in clumps, or of a smiling dead person. To tell it incorrectly was to open the door for demons. In Greece, if you had recurring nightmares, it was called enipnion kakon, a systemic bad dream. The solution? Go to the temple of Asclepios, but this time not for healing, but to ask for dream removal. But do you know the most interesting thing? In ancient Egypt, it was believed you could resolve someone else's dream by sleeping in their place. A relative would sleep where you had the nightmare, and if they dreamed a good version of it, the curse was broken. A dream, after all, is a thin door between two worlds. And sometimes, when you fall asleep, you are not alone in your dream. Perhaps someone else is watching you from the other side. And once they learned how to face the curses in their dreams, people realized another of its powers. A dream was not just a personal omen. It was a passport to the throne. Have you ever dreamed of standing on a high platform before thousands of people? Or dreamed of wearing a crown, a golden robe? In modern times, you might wake up and laugh. What a fantasy. But if you lived a few thousand years ago, you might have just been chosen by the heavens. Let's start with a familiar name, Alexander the Great. Before conquering Egypt, he dreamed that the god Ammon, the great ram-headed deity, called him son. One dream. And when Alexander went to the Siwa oasis, the priests at the temple of Ammon confirmed the dream was true. From then on, he was not just a king. He became a demigod. This was not an isolated case. In Babylon, King Nabonidus recounted that he was called in a dream by the god Marduk. In Assyria, King Ashurbanipal believed the god Nabu appeared in his dream and gave him a pen and a sword. The conclusion? Whoever dreams right rules. Sometimes, a royal dream was a political weapon. If you could declare, "I dreamed that my ancestor appeared and placed his hand on my shoulder, and he said, 'I choose you,' that was it. You just bypassed all your relatives vying for the throne." Dreams were even a way to explain historical events. A king is overthrown. It's because he dreamed of a blackbird flying over his head. A miraculous victory in battle. A god appeared in a dream, telling us to attack at moonrise. A dream was not just sacred. It was the language of power. You could pretend while awake. But when you slept, if a god chose you, no one dared to object. That's why dreams were recorded on stone, on clay tablets, on golden steles. And if tonight you dream of sitting on a throne, then remember, you are not dreaming a crazy dream. You are continuing an ancient tradition where sleeping could also be a way to reign. To hold that power, to turn a dream into a crown, one could not just believe blindly. They turned dream interpretation into a science. If you think dream interpretation is a job anyone can do, just by making wild guesses, then you're living in the wrong era. Because in ancient civilizations, dream interpretation was a science. There were training schools. There were curricula. There were degrees. And there was competition. In Mesopotamia, a practitioner had to study for at least 10 years. This wasn't interpreting dreams by feeling, but reading dreams according to an extremely complex coding system. The Babylonians left us the longest dream record in human history, called Ishkar Zikuku, the dream catalog, with nearly 400 common types of dreams, each with analysis, consequences, and solutions. Every symbol in a dream had a predefined code. No ad-libbing allowed. The Egyptians wrote their dream books in 2 ink colors: black for good dreams, red for bad, dangerous ones. A passage from an Egyptian dream book reads, "If a man sees himself flying over the Nile like a bird, it means his soul wishes to escape its bonds." No one was allowed to misinterpret, because if you did, you could be charged with spiritual fraud. Some modern scholars call the ancient dream decoders the first psychologists. They observed patients, recorded dreams, and noted their behavior upon waking, then drew patterns of the unconscious. The Greeks divided dreams into 5 types, not all of which should be believed: divine dreams, random dreams, from overeating, dreams from fear, prophetic dreams, and the rare and powerful dream of meeting a god. That is, there are dreams you should tell, and dreams you should forget. And only the experienced knew which was which. Today, people delve into dreams with brainwave monitors and AI. But perhaps what our ancestors did 4,000 years ago was more subtle and accurate. Because they didn't just study dreams with machines. They lived with them, revered them, feared them, and saw them as a guide for survival. Finishing this part, you might start to see your own dreams in a different light. No longer something to casually share with friends in the morning, but a clue, a mirror, a message from a place science cannot yet measure. And now that we understand the rules, the codes, the complex rituals, we come to our final story. A story not about how people revered or decoded dreams, but about the price paid when the clearest warning from the dream world is ignored. The night is still long, and we have reached our final tale. It was the night before the Ides of March, 44 BC. In a luxurious villa in Rome, the entire city seemed to hold its breath. The wind howled through the stone columns. Windows suddenly burst open. Amidst these strange omens, Calpurnia, Caesar's devoted wife, sat up in bed, drenched in a cold sweat. She had just had a terrifying nightmare. She saw their house collapse, and she was holding her husband's bloody corpse, weeping bitterly. The dream was so real, she could feel the warmth of his blood cooling on her hands. The next morning, as Caesar prepared to put on his toga to go to the Senate, Calpurnia stopped him. With tears in her eyes, she recounted the dream and begged him, with all her love and fear, to stay home that day. Caesar, a man who believed in omens but was also incredibly proud, hesitated. He saw his wife, normally a rational woman, panicking over a dream. He almost agreed. But just then, Decimus Brutus, one of Caesar's most trusted friends, and also one of the masterminds of the assassination plot, arrived. He mocked Caesar's fear, arguing that postponing a Senate meeting just because of a woman's dream would be a disgrace. He said the entire Senate was waiting to crown Caesar. Pride won. Caesar dismissed his wife's warning and went with Decimus. The rest, as they say, is history. Caesar was stabbed 23 times at the foot of the statue of his old rival, Pompey. Calpurnia's dream had come true in the most brutal way. And so, our journey through the ancient world of dreams ends here. From the clay tablets of Mesopotamia the healing rituals of Greece to the ignored warning in Rome, we see that a dream was never just a dream. It is the whisper of the universe, the map of the soul, the bridge connecting worlds. Tonight, when you close your eyes, try to listen. Who knows? You might hear something too. Dear friend, if dreams were the place where the ancients went to meet the gods, then when they awoke, they would need something to continue enduring reality. Not water, not tea, not modern-style coffee, but something flowing, warm, as murky as the earth, but as fragrant as herbs. Something one could eat, could drink, could offer to the gods, and could also pay the builders of the pyramids with. Something that, with just one sip, you could forget hunger, forget sorrow, and if you drank enough, perhaps even speak with your ancestors. Yes, tonight, I will tell you about beer. Beer was not just a drink. Beer was once the foundation of the national economy, the social glue, the common language of farmers, priests, and even pharaohs. And do you know the strangest thing? Humans did not learn to cultivate barley to eat. They learned it to make beer. This means we did not become farmers for bread. We became farmers because we wanted another drink, from Sumer to Egypt, from the women in the kitchen to the kings in their ceremonies, from the temple builders to the souls in their tombs. All once held a jug of beer, and together they fermented an entire civilization. Now, please do something familiar. Pull the blanket up to your chest, tilt your head back a little, take a slow, deep breath, and let me tell you the story of one of the greatest inventions in human history. Not bread, not writing, but beer. If you think ancient humans began agriculture because they were hungry, I'm sorry, but they began because they were thirsty. Not thirsty for water, but thirsty for beer. Thousands of years ago, in the land between the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, known as Mesopotamia, humans first cultivated barley. Not to make porridge, not to make bread, but to brew a thick, cloudy, golden liquid, fragrant as fermented grass, that soothed the soul after a day of hunting or arguing with one's spouse. Welcome to the dawn of beer, where humanity first decided no one needs a reason to drink. We just need a harvest. And you'll love this. Beer back then wasn't the clear, ice-cold liquid in a can. It was more like a soup than a beverage. A warm mixture of fermented grains, water, wild yeast, and various herbs. People drank it with straws made of wood, carved and passed down from generation to generation, like family heirlooms, to be able to sip the clear liquid beneath a layer of grain sediment and husks. Just imagine a family sitting around a fire, each holding a straw, gathered around a large ceramic jar, sipping together, talking, and then forgetting their hunger. It is an image of togetherness, of community, bound by a shared jug of beer. Archaeologists have found clay tablets inscribed with beer recipes dating back to 3000 BC, and among them, there is even a song meant to be sung while brewing, praying for the beer to be good. O Ninkasi, goddess of the yeast, you who make the foam rise like the river's waves, you who quench our throats after the sun's angry days. No joke. They had a goddess dedicated to beer, Ninkasi. And when they made beer, they sang for the divine to enter the yeast, because if they brewed it wrong, the goddess would punish them with diarrhea. And what's even stranger is that it wasn't men who brewed beer, but women. The Sumerian women, with braided hair and strong arms, were the first microbiologists. They had no labs, only clay pots, natural yeast, and the intuition of someone who had brewed hundreds of batches. They were the ones who controlled the food chain, nutrition, and even the family economy. They knew when the grain fermented best, how much water was just right to not anger the goddess Ninkasi, and if a distinguished guest arrived, which type to brew for drinking, offering to the gods, and sealing a marriage alliance. A text from 1800 BC clearly describes, women possessed the technique of brewing beer as if it were a gift from the gods. They preserved the yeast as they preserved the destiny of their family. Even the hymn to Ninkasi, the oldest beer recipe in the world, was a professional lullaby passed from mother to daughter, with words like a prayer. The brewer, with a gentle hand, who makes the barley kneel in love, who boils life with the breath of the sun. In many large cities, like Uruk, Lagash, or Nippur, women owned the breweries, many of which produced thousands of liters per week. They kept records in cuneiform, classified with clay seals, and distributed through a sophisticated bartering system. Over 4,000 years ago, while the men were wrestling with wild oxen, a group of women sat by clay pots, calculating temperatures, planning distribution, and managing the entire culinary ecosystem of a city-state. Beer didn't just make people hazy. Beer gave women power. From the women's kitchens, beer flowed out, not just to sustain families, but to run an entire empire. Let's go to Egypt, where tens of thousands of workers built the Great Pyramids. They ate and drank beer every day. That ration was not just sustenance, it was a management tool. Beer was easier to preserve than many other foods. It provided abundant energy for hard labor, and more importantly, it kept the massive workforce happier and more compliant. One could say that beer was the soft power of the ancient state, a means to manage the greatest construction projects in history. But beer was not just a tool of management, it was also a savior. In Egyptian mythology, there is a story that the goddess of war, Sekhmet, in the form of a lioness, grew enraged with humanity and began a bloody massacre. To stop her, the god Ra ordered the people to brew 7,000 jars of beer and dye them red with pomegranate juice. When Sekhmet saw the field of red beer, she mistook it for blood and began to drink greedily. She drank until she was drunk. Her rage dissipated, and she transformed into Hathor, the goddess of love and joy. Humanity was saved by beer. To commemorate this event, the Egyptians held an annual festival of drunkenness, where everyone drank beer together to honor the gods and pray for peace. Beer was also a medicine. Egyptian physicians used beer as a solvent to dissolve medicinal herbs. Prescriptions written on papyrus often had formulas like, crush the leaves of this plant, mix with honey and a sweet jar of beer, drink for 3 days. Beer not only helped mask the bitter taste of the medicine, but also helped the active ingredients to be better absorbed. And the role of beer did not stop in the world of the living. It crossed the very boundary of death. If one day you lie down, not to sleep, but to sleep forever, what would you want someone to bring for you? A letter from a loved one, a necklace from your father, or a jug of beer? Don't be surprised, because in ancient Egypt, the first thing people thought of when preparing someone for the afterlife was to leave a few jugs of beer. Beer in funerary rites was not just a drink. It was provisions for the soul. It was believed that the dead also get thirsty, and they needed beer to live a good life in the other world. In the tombs, jugs of beer were placed ceremoniously next to food offerings. The soul needed beer to pass through the 12 gates of the underworld, to offer to the guardian gods, and to show, "I come in peace, and I bring drinks." But not only the dead, the stars also drank, at least in the belief of the Egyptians. They believed that when a pharaoh died, his soul flew to the sky, becoming a star in the constellation of Orion. And whenever the stars shone brightest during the flood season, it was when he was sipping a mouthful of beer from the heavens, then using that power to command the Nile to flood, bringing life to the crops. A cosmos full of fermentation. And so, from a sip of beer in the mortal world, we have followed it to the realm of immortality. You might think you are raising a glass just to quench your thirst. But thousands of years ago, someone else raised that same glass to build a temple, to love, to speak with the gods. Our journey with the drink of the mortal world pauses here. If beer is the drink of those who walk the earth, then in the next part, we will meet those who do not live to drink, but ride the wind to carry messages. Now, close your eyes. Our story has ended, and the night is deep.